Hi everyone, I'm Natalia. Welcome to my channel. And this is my usual books I read and books I'm going to read for all of you out there who love to read as much as I do. I share 7 books that I have recently read, my thoughts on them in case if you're interested. I'm assuming those of you watching are interested in books. And the next 7 books that I have picked out for myself to read, to share with all of you. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts if you have read these books or if you're about to read this book. So very curious to hear. So let me start with this. Now, a lot of people are reading this book right now, and I have picked it up because I personally wanted to learn more about the whore Babylon. Don't know much about her. And I think that there's a lot of scattered literature on her out there. Peter Gray is a co-founder together with his partner. They're co-founders of Scarlet Imprint. And as I learned, Scarlet Imprint is actually in dedication, or if you will, in devotion to the whore Babylon. Hence, it's called Scarlet Imprint. And I have read Peter's Apocalyptic Witchcraft several years ago. It flew over my head. I felt like he just wasn't really getting to the point, at least how I read it at the time. So I was really worried when I picked it up that this is also going to fly over my head. Sometimes reading occultish, contextualized books tend to do that. So no, this did not fly over my head. And Peter is really writes it, at least from what I remember from Apocalyptic Witchcraft, is differently. He's more down to earth. He's funny. He's smack into your face. He says it exactly how it is. And I was enjoying this book. I started off, and he starts off with the history. And this is a historical account, if you will, in a way, about Babylon throughout the history. He discusses Babylon as seen through the eyes of the Book of Revelations. And then he talks on Babylon through the eyes of Crowley and the eyes of Jack Parsons, and so on and so forth. And then he talks about his relationship to Babylon and a way there's sprinkled around ways people can get in devotional worship of the Babylon. So I started off and I really enjoyed it. I personally, this just shows you how ignorant and untouched I am for the most part by Christianity. I didn't even know what Book of Revelations is, believe it or not. I just didn't, which I suppose my ignorance might be a bliss in some cases. So it was interesting to learn. And then I got to the page 45, and this is where the book took a different turn for me. And from then on, I tried to get out of the state of mind I was in, and it was very difficult. Now, on page 45, Peter, he shares an entry. This is not Peter's writing, but this is an entry taken from Herodotus, as Herodotus describes a yearly ritual that the daughters of Babylon would do every year, where the virgins would sacrifice their virginity at the temple to a man who would have sex with her as a goddess. So it's a ritual where virgins will go to a precinct and they will sacrifice themselves, sacrifice their virginity at the temple to have sex with men as a way to, not only as a devotion, but as a way to embody, I suppose, a goddess. And again, this is fine, nothing wrong with that. What bothered me about this entry, again, this is not Peter, but this is he inserts in here Herodotus' description. What he describes is this: not only will these women, so they will go to precinct, they will sit, and they will wait for the man to come and toss a silver coin into their lap, which will indicate you have been chosen. But here's what struck me about this passage. A woman who has once taken her seat is not allowed to return home till one of the strangers thrown a silver coin into her lap and takes her with him beyond the holy ground. When he throws the coin, he says the words, "The goddess Meliata prosper you." Venus is called Meliata by the Assyrians. The silver coin may be of any size, it cannot be refused, for that is forbidden by the law, since once thrown, it is sacred. The woman goes with the first man who throws her money and rejects no one. So the woman is not allowed to reject anyone at all. When she has gone with him and so satisfies the goddess, she returns home. So only then is she allowed to return home. And from that time forth, no gift, however great, will prevail with her. Such of the women are tall and beautiful, are soon released, of course. I mean, this is pure sexism. But others who are ugly have to stay a long time before they can fulfill the law. Some have waited 3 or 4 years in the precinct. A custom very much like this is found also in certain parts of the island of Cyprus. So I read this, and I have a hard time imagining a woman reading this and not get her blood boiled. I read it to my husband, and I said, what the fuck does this sound like to you? And he said, sounds like sex trafficking to me, like sex market. Women go there, they're like sex objects. They sit there, they wait for the coin to be tossed, they're being bought. It's all masqueraded as it is in a as a ritual, as a way of initiating into the goddess. And of course, the beautiful and tall are chosen, and the so-called ugly women have to stay there for 3-4 years, almost to serve the penance to the goddess. Again, it bothers me, but I realized this is not Peter's writing, right? So I realized this is him putting in here what Herodotus has described. And then there's 3 sentences followed by Peter. And honestly, I expected Peter to contest this. I expected Peter, my God, my father's name is Peter too, and my nephew's name is Peter. I expected Peter, what is the deal? Peter to be able to at least say that in this custom, we can clearly see historically how women were objectified or something. This is what Peter says. Right after this passage I read you, the sexuality was not theirs. It was from the goddess, and the goddess receives everyone. This acceptance is what it means to be a holy whore. And then he goes on to a completely different chapter titled something else. And that's all he says about this. And my blood at this point boiled. I thought, really? Do we not see what is happening and how this ritualistic glossing over using the goddess in order to, literally, it sounds to me like sexual abuse of women. So this boiled my blood over. And I thought, okay, maybe you're missing the point. Maybe you really read, maybe you read with your, I don't know, woman's heart. Maybe you read because you have problem personally being subjugated by man. Maybe you're projecting. So I read on. As I read on, my blood continued to boil, because what continued to happen is what I experienced. It felt as if goddess is being sexualized, as if she is there, a sacred chalice for men to fuck, a sacred chalice into which men enter in order to perform their sacred magic acts. And there's even discussion here where Peter writes, and he says that to worship Lady Babel and the whole Babel, she favors the beautiful and quintessence type of women. She does not favor ugly and old. I don't know. There were a lot of things that just kind of bugged me about this book in that regard. It just felt like a man's permission slip to ritualistically find a reason and excuse to fuck women and to ritualize that. It just, I struggled with that very, very much. So I struggled how there was so much sex magic tied to magic, period, as if magic cannot exist without sex magic. And women were just really, you know what, I don't know why is it always men that's gotta fuck women. It left out so many things. It left out men who are impotent. It left out women who are lesbian or bisexual. I mean, it just left out so much. So I struggled with it. I finished it all the way through and ended up book painting the hell out of this book. I don't regret reading it because I wanted to know. And this is what really struck and bothered me the most about the book. First, before I say that, I want to say this. I walked away telling myself this is Peter's way of looking and relating to the whore Babylon. That's all it is. It just is, I'm not angry at Peter. I don't want to kill him. I don't want to write him this email. I just look at it as it is. This is what it is. This is just one man's view, one man's of relationship to this feminine. And that's okay. That is his relationship to this feminine. It doesn't mean that has to be everybody's relationship to the feminine. what bothered me the most is that intuitively reading this book as a woman, and I cannot imagine any woman reading this book today that would feel like this book is amazing. I just have a hard time picturing it. But my intuition kept telling me this is really problematic. The way it's written is really, really problematic. And what bothered me the most is that as typical as women have been historically taught to shut the fuck up and not to speak up their voice, and hence learn to never value and honor and listen to their intuition, I also did not listen to my intuition. I went to my husband, a man. I went to a man with passages that I read to him, and I said, do I see this clearly? In other words, I had to have another man to interpret to me what I already was picking up with my intuition. If that wasn't enough, not trusting my intuition, this is what it made me so mistrustful of myself. I also talked to some women, especially some women who were older, some women who are in occults. And I wrote some also women writers who read on Babylon to get a little bit better perspective. Am I missing something here? And pretty much all of them said, yeah, this is what happens when men write about women. It is interpreted through the lens of sex and sex magic. So if you're reading it, keep reading it. I suggest reading it. It is an interesting read, and you may feel something very different about it. I picked up what I picked up, and so like I said, it is what it is. I look at it as one man writing about a woman. That is his perspective. I don't take it as, for me, this is who the Whore of Babylon is. I still don't know who the hell she is, but she's definitely not it for me. So that's that. That's a Red Goddess. And if you read it, I'll be interested to hear what you read. The second books that I read after the Red Goddess is the Brazen Vessel. This is big, and I love it when you bookbend it. This is what happens. It goes sideways. First thing I want to say is Scarlet Imprint does an absolute beautiful, beautiful respect and homage to books. I read it without slippery cover because I like to take them off when I read, and holding this texturized was such a dream and a pleasure. So reading this, and the pages were so thick and beautiful. Reading this book was a beautiful experience, just completely enhances your senses. If you're very tactile, you're going to love their books. What is Brazen Vessel? Brazen Vessel is a compilation of essays throughout, I believe, about 10 or even more years between Peter Gray and his partner, Alkistis, who is also co-founder of Scarlet Imprint. She does all the typography for the Scarlet Imprint. And it's an essays that tend to alternate between Peter and her, and sometimes more Peter, sometimes more her. She's a dancer. And when I started reading this book, after Red Goddess, I was like, oh God, can I really stomach more of Peter? And then I thought, okay, well, he's obviously in this long relationship with this woman that sounds very depthful, very interesting. She's a dancer. I brought her essay. She writes really well. And I thought, okay, maybe I misread you, Peter. So in other words, I was trying to redeem my faith in Peter. And there's a lot of essays. Some of them were really, really interesting to read. Some of the essays by Peter on, for example, they're very similar to apocalyptic witchcraft, but a little bit more digestible, were very interesting. Essays of Peter on, for example, technology and what technology does to the privacy. Our privacy was very, very interesting. Some of her essays on dance and how she creates Sabbath dance and her relationship to the body and our need of relationship to the body. All of those things were very interesting. Some of the essays I really didn't care for. There were some of the essays where, again, Peter talks a lot about how to him magic is sex magic. Witchcraft to him cannot exist without sex magic, at least how I understood it. And there's passages in there where Peter talks about pretty BDSM practices. Again, you know what, whatever rocks you both, all consensual. BDSM, I think, is wonderful sex practice for a lot of people. What struck me about it is Peter's discussion about women having ability to naturally bleed, which is sacred. Men are unable to bleed. And so there were some pretty explicit discussions about making his body bleed in order to have the sacred ritualistic things happen. What I got from this, the way Peter came to me from reading these essays, is that it sounds like he's a little bit of extremist to me, at least how he came across, that he needs to push his body to a very, very drastic extent in order to have transcendent experience, which I think some people do. And I think there's a lot of people who don't need to do that. So it's interesting. Again, I took it for what it was. I took it for Peter, writing about Peter, about his experiences. And a lot of them don't really resonate with me. I disagree with some of them. But again, these are just his experience. He's not telling me how to live my life. He's not telling me I have to do this. So for that reason, it is what it is. The next one I read is Jake Strachan-Kent, Padmintonium. Now, there is also a book by Aleister Crowley on it's called The Key of Solomon, right? It's basically, again, all the demons of Goetia and their description. Between those two and this one, I would definitely go for this one. And this is a really interesting, this is more really a resource book, I would say, versus a book you want to read, unless you're just really curious about each demon and what they represent. But this is more like a resource book. If you're also going to do work with Goetic spirits, this is a good book. What I loved the most, my favorite part, is that Jake refers to them as spirits, as he should, versus demons or daemons. Daemons is another good one, but spirits, I just love that. He brings it back and out of Christianity, out of all of this religious biases, as it should be. So this was really, really good. You can get it on Amazon. Because I was so curious also to, this is as if intuitively I knew. I was so curious to know how women thought about the Whore Babylon before I read Peter. This is like my intuition was telling me, you need some women voices. That I got this one that was recommended. This is Women of Babylon, Howling of Women's Voices. It's a compilation of women talking about their experience. It's not just experience with the Babylon. There's some essays on Lucifer as well. Some of it was interesting. Some of it was left very little to be desired. Would I recommend it as a compilation for those who are looking for to learn about Babylon from a women's perspective? No. There is another one that was recommended to me that is out of print, but I think you can somehow find it and it's not super expensive, but I would not recommend. I mean, just for me, it just was not worth it. So that. And I think at this point, honestly, guys, I'm kind of done with Lady Babylon. It's just not my jam. It sounds like a goddess that perhaps very deeply still misunderstood. There's a woman, somebody pointed out to me on this woman, her name is Al-Madina, and she has a website, almadina.com. She has devoted her life, as I understand, to the Whore Babylon, and she has written extensively about the Whore Babylon, and she has a book that's supposed to come out that is her experiences, and that's something I would love to get eventually, to read more. Her experience sounds like that would be really, really interesting. But other than that, I think I'm pretty much done. Okay. The book I was going to read, the book I read it in grad school. I started to read it, and I just was not in a state of mind to read Jung, or not Jung, this is not Jung, but Marion Woodman. She is a Jungian analyst. So for me, it just was like, I just was not in a state of mind to read any Jungian writing. So I skipped it, but I substituted and I read 3 additional books instead of that one. They're all short reads. The first one that I read is Russian Black Magic by Natasha Halvin. Natasha Halvin is, she's a witch. She also comes from a Slavic background. And she has, apart from this one, she has another one. It's Slavic. I think it's Slavic witchcraft. I have another one. So I read this because I had it. It's a quick read. I had it for a while because I wanted to go back to my roots, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about Slavic magic and how they conceptualized it, I guess, how they wrote about it, what they believed in, what practices they had heard to. So this was interesting. He talked about Белый Бог, Черный Бог, things I already knew. And she talked about some of the things. In the end, she shares, some of the things like blood magic and stuff of sorts. So it was really interesting read. Probably not exactly for me or for my practice, but a lot of things I read is not necessarily because I want to practice them. It's because I just want to understand. So I want to broaden the scope of my understanding. So I read that. Then I read, as you know, some of you know, I am on a Lilith trip, which is taking a very interesting turn, and I may talk about it on this channel. This is one of the Lilith books that I picked up by Deborah Grant Scott. It's also a very quick read. This is good. It's not great, but it's good in my opinion. She does a great job of historical discussion of Lilith. What struck me especially is that she, as far as I understand, Lilith in a lot of history has been clashed and enmeshed with the demon Lamashku, maybe I'm probably saying it wrong, that was a child killer, and Sarah forgot that name, was a child killer. So she actually does talks about it here, which I thought that was really, really good and historically accurate as far as I understand. So this was an interesting, quick read. And then she talks about how women can, what can we do? How can we kind of embody this part of ourselves? Very quick to the point. It had some interesting references that I picked up. I love books that have references. So it was really, this was good. I wouldn't say it's like it's an amazing book, but if you just want a quick and dirty and to the point introduction of Lilith, this is a really good one. I'm trying to find if I can find that name so I can read it and pronounce it right, but it escapes me. So another thing that I wanted to say about this is, oh God, what did I want to say about this? The Bernie's print is the one where it always, this is another historical thing, it gets confused for Lilith. This is what I learned doing research on Lilith, and it is this one that I'm talking about. You guys all know it, you all have seen it. It's this image right here. So this one gets often taken to represent Lilith, but it's actually not Lilith. It's got mistakenly taken because of the owls at her feet. Lilith is often seen and portrayed as an owl, but I read somewhere that it's not that type of an owl. So that was an interesting thing to discover and to learn. So if you want a quick and dirty and to the point, that's good. Then another one that I read in lieu of Dancing in the Flames of Dark Goddess is Honoring Death by S. Connolly, and S stands for Stephanie. I just saw a YouTube interview with her, and that's how I learned her name. Stephanie. If you don't know Stephanie Connolly, and if you are into demonology, I would recommend her to you. I have read her books before. She's very pragmatic, to the point, clear writer, very similar to, if you ever read Jason Miller's books, Protective Magic, Spirit, Strategic Sorcery. Jason Miller writes very pragmatically, very clear, very to the point. Stephanie does the same thing. She's very clear, to the point, pragmatic writer. And one of the things, my understanding, that she did for the whole occult world, where people are into demonology, is she is trying to bring it back to understanding that these are all demons that we're working with, to take away this Christian understanding that these are demons and they're bad and they're evil, and not to say that they are completely benevolent, no, but this idea that these are just completely evil spirits is inaccurate. And she's very against, in her book, The Complete Guide to Demonology, she's very clear about the fact that no, you don't do it Solomonic way. You don't trap a demon and then make them do you beating. She says that's very disrespecting to this energy, it's disrespectful to these demons. What you do is you have relationship with them, just like you will have relationship with any spirits. And I wonder if Jackson Strachan, who wrote a lot about it, would agree. Unfortunately, he passed away, but I'd be curious if I will find that in any of the writings. So this was interesting book on pretty much what necromancy is, working with the dead, how people part the veil. Then there was a lot about death. There was even the grieving process that people go through. Some of the death demons one can call in, banishing ritual. So it was an interesting but quick to the point read. So death things always fascinate me. I mean, Scorpio, you can't go wrong. Last book that I read was Alex Marr, Witches of America, and I bought it initially in paperback, and then I had to return it and reorder it in hard copy because the font is so small, and my eyesight is going. Was really hard to read. This was recommended to me by a friend, and this is a really interesting book. It's if you want to read that, especially if you feel like you lost your zest, your enthusiasm, your appeal for occult and witchcraft, this I think will bring you back. Alex Marr is also a really good writer. She initially, my understanding is that this was made in the documentary, which is on her website, and then she wrote it into the book. And there's a page that I highlighted, which describes a passage which pretty much sums up what the book is about. But it's an interesting book. She travels through America, and she discusses people in different types of practices, and she becomes not only a participant but also an active observer. For example, she watches the high ritual magic being performed, and how she's being initiated into fiery magic, witchcraft, and then also she was watching some of the Wicca practices. So it's really interesting all throughout different types of practices and things like that. And she does pretty good stuff, way of distilling some of the basic historical things. For example, on Gardner and Wicca were very accurate from what I read by Michael Howard. He has a great history of Wicca. It's really, really interesting when you read it. I think a lot of people who practice Wicca don't really know the historical roots and how much of it is really actually made up. But it's interesting. And then she also talks about Crowley, and she has pretty good, interesting brief history about Crowley. But where is this? Okay, here she goes. She says, where she says she envies people who are practicing their craft of any kind. Because I envy them, the believers. They have guidance, they have clarity, their days have structure and meaning. And quietly for a long time, I've coveted the things. After all, they're what most of us want badly, regardless of whether we consider ourselves lapsed Catholics or born-agains or strident atheists. Morpheus has perfect conviction in a world that I do not understand, and I feel compelled to step inside her belief. When I put my work aside, I have to admit that I am searching, hopefully, and with great reservation, for proof of something larger, whatever its name. And this is what really sets out the book. She is in search of something greater, something that will lend not only meaning and significance to her life and to her existence, but something that will give her this way of structuring her whole pathway through this life. And this is really Alex's, in a way, quest toward figuring out where she lands, figuring out if this is for her. And I'm not going to give away whether she finds a practice that sits well with her. But it's really interesting read, and it's a good read. Again, she's a really good writer, so I really recommend The Witches of America for you to pick up. So these are my 7-ish book that I read. There was one book, hold on, that I'm reading from this pile, and it is Satanic Feminism. I'm still reading it, so it's going to my next 7 pile. The reason why this is taking me a while to read this book is because the font, even in the hard copy, is small, and my eyes really hurt and strain. And I cannot read this book for a long time, primarily because solely for this reason. So it's killing me because the book is fascinating. The writer of the book is also a very good writer. You would think that the academic book such as this is going to be dry. It is not dry. It does not read dry. It reads very, very, it draws you in. It's very interesting. One of the things you got to keep in mind is that this is really, it's more like a very long research thesis, primarily into Saturn, Lucifer, demon, whoever you want to use it interchangeably, and relationship to feminism and women in the 19th century. So it's really trying to understand how did it suddenly go from being this evil force to being a liberator of women and feminine. And one thing people have got to keep in mind, I feel, reading this book, is that this is a historical snapshot of how Lucifer, for example, has stepped into this lens through which he is now suddenly being seen, this lens of being seen as somebody who is there to liberate women and to bring them to their freedom. So we have to understand that a lot of archetypal energies or a lot of spirit energies that are out there in the world have over the years have been layered historically, depending on historical period advanced through and depending how the historical period has layered those archetypes. It doesn't mean that Lucifer cannot possess that quality, but we got to understand there's other qualities to him as well, apart from just liberating women, and same goes for everything else. So one got to keep it in mind, because I feel like this book can be quickly read as, oh, you know, this is exactly what it stands for. And no, you just got to take it historical context. So next 7, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, yeah, I have 6, but with Satanic Feminism, it's 7. Okay. So you all know that I'm on a Lilith skip. So the first book I'm going to read is this one. Let me know if you read it. This has been recommended to me. This is also a scholarly thesis. It's called Lilith, Gender, and Demonology by Stephanie Spartan. This is out of print. I ended up splurging and getting it for $100, which was better than it's going for like $225 some other places. And then I found out that the writer, who's professor here in California, because it was her thesis, I found a link to the whole thesis. So I'm going to link it below. If you want it, you can read her thesis for free. If you're really interested, you need to splurge on this, although I did, but you know, it is what it is. So I'm really excited to read about this and learn more about Lilith, especially since the writer is a woman. Then continuing on a Lilith Kid, this book. I found this on eBay. This is also, I think, out of print, but you can get it used for like $40. So this is which Lilith, feminist writers, recreate the world's first woman. So I'm really excited. Sounds like an anthology of different women, feminist writers specifically writing about her. So this would be really interesting. And I venture to say this is going to be a quick read. I need to sprinkle quick reads in between dense material to kind of get myself rolling. So that's it on Lilith. I have been interested in left-hand paths in a sense of understanding what it is. I don't think I'll be practicing left-hand path, but I'm curious what it is because a lot of people talk about it. And this book came recommended. Let me know if you have read this book. It is Lords of the Left-Hand Path, and it is by Stephen Flowers, PhD. And Stephen has doctorate in Germanic languages and medieval studies from University of Texas. So you can't go wrong, right, with somebody who is scholarly writing about left-hand path. Hopefully, this will be good. So I'm very curious to learn more about it. I just saw Dennis, what is your last name? From Foolish Fish. Dennis has a great video on left-hand path that it all goes back to Tantra and Tantric practices. So that would be interesting to see if it's anywhere near here. Then, believe it or not, I have fiction. My eyes are about to pop out. I have fiction in my list. I know some of you are like, really, you have fiction? Didn't you try to read fiction last time and it didn't work out? Well, this one I saw on one of the Instagrammers that I started to follow, and her Instagram looks really, really rich. I think this person is an artist. It's really interesting Instagram. When I see interesting Instagrammers, and then I see that they list books, I pay attention because something tells me that these interesting people will have interesting books. Let me know if you read this. The cover looks like it's pubic hair. At least to me, it looks like pubic hair, but it's not. But if this is what the author intended, I'd be very glad if we can all go back to the bushy pubic hair. Does this look like pubic hair? It looks like it to me, right? No? Okay, so this is Casey Aker. It's called My Mother, Demonology, and Novel. I'm excited to read, see what it's about. Let me tell you what it's about. Casey Aker holds a unique place. Well, wait a second. This doesn't tell you. Oh, yeah, it does. Okay. Based loosely on the relationship between Colette Pignon and George Batal, My Mother, Demonology tells a powerful story of a woman struggling with contradictory impulses for both love and solitude. I'll let you know. Let me know if any of you read Casey Aker. Next one, because I have 4 volumes of this. With these volumes by Jake Straka, I can't believe I'm starting to remember your name, Jake. Jake Stratton Kent. Starting to rub on me, Jake. May your soul rest in peace. we started off with his first true grimoire, which I reviewed in one of the videos, and now I have, this is Geosopia Volume 1, then there's Geosopia Volume 2, then there is, what is it? Crypt of Cryptian. You see how not good I am with these names, Volume 1 and 2. So because I'm on this roll, I'm reading this history and learning some more, so I'm really excited to read it. Again, Scarlet imprint, beautifully bound, can't go wrong. So that's on the list. And finally, the last one, this was recommended to me, Zach from Tiger's Abyss, who often exchange books for read. This guy is a fucking brainiac and reads really good literature. This one. It is called The Dancing Sorcerer, Essays on the Mind of the Magician by Milsberger. This is from Anathema Publishing, another occult publishing house. So I'm really excited to read it. Really excited. So I'm really excited for my next 7 books. They all look very, very yummy. I had to do this video today because I finished the other ones and I was only down to 1 book and I was already dipping my toes in the other books. Because I have a lot of what I call quick and easy reads. For example, I have right now a few books by Jason Miller. I have some book by Starhawk. And to me, they're all like in between books because I tend to go through them really fast. So I probably will sprinkle something in between, but I'm really, really excited to read them. Let me know where you're at with your books. What are you reading right now? Let me know if you read any of the books that I have read or read any of the books I'm about to read. What are your thoughts on them? Love hearing your thoughts, and I hope you all have a great time and a great weekend. Bye.